fans, Shad Ring with Bronco Planet, and here we're going over Bronco headlines with Andy Lindahl. How are you doing there, sir?
Good. How are you, Shad?
Oh, well, welcome out to the cave. I'm doing outstanding. What a Bronco win. Scary. I don't know about you. Very, very high, very low, all over the board. Blood pressure medicine going down like crazy, and they finally pull it off.
Yeah, it was an interesting game. I won't lie. Well, first off, I should probably admit, I didn't think they were going to get this game when I saw it on the schedule. I really didn't think they were going to win this game when I saw how physical that Baltimore matchup was. And then in the first quarter, when they're down 14-0, the offense is struggling. It looks like Jamal Charles is going to be a factor all night. It didn't look good. But you know what? It was a fun game. It was a fun game, and I'm glad they're 2-0. What can you say?
Well, some of the things we're talking about on this show is the headlines. And so probably the biggest headline in Denver has been this offensive line or lack of offensive line. And I think some people out there, me included, thought, well, these younger guys are going to struggle a little bit. But I didn't think the two former All-Pro guards were going to have such a hard time. Is it just me, or are they not looking good?
Well, no, I mean, definitely it's been tough. Now, I would say this, I would warn everybody. I think what you saw in Kansas City was a mixture of uncertainty about the scheme that they are still trying to all kind of blend together on, and they were tired. Make no doubt about it. I don't think it's any coincidence the Baltimore Ravens lost to the Raiders and the Broncos struggled in KC, because that was a street fight. I don't know if it translated to TV. They were beating the tar out of each other. And that's really what both offensive schemes are designed to do. They want to beat you up. They want to play physical. I tried to talk to Luis Vasquez after the game. Luis was like, man, I'm wiped out. And Evan Mathis was sitting next to him. Both of them looked like it was week 8 as everybody around the locker room was jumping around and celebrating. I just think it looked bad the other night because they were partially tired. That's a very good Kansas City defense. But at the end of the day, we all have to be patient. The zone running scheme is not quick to put in. And if you talk to former Broncos like Mark Schlereth that played in really the most successful version of the zone run scheme, he'll tell you it takes months to get the chemistry down. And this is a team that didn't get its starting offensive line in that locker room until the first week of the regular season. So we have to be patient. It hasn't looked good. I think every game it's going to look a little bit better. And I'm very excited to see what happens Sunday in Detroit because now they've had 10 days to rest and figure it out.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit then, transition to the whole offense. So this whole Peyton Manning versus Gary Kubiak, what works? I mean, and you can't really blame fans. I mean, you sit there, you watch Manning getting shotgun at the end of that second quarter, and boom, 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 and all of a sudden you're like, hey, this is just like old times. I'm loving it. At the end of the game, boom, 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 same thing. And then you're like, I saw Kubiak came out at halftime, and he's like, yeah, we got to establish a run. And I'm thinking, and then they tried it. It seemed like second and 11, second and 12, second and 9, and it wasn't working. So what do you think? Just keep grinding away and make sure it works?
Yeah, I know it's not the popular answer. Look, if you talk about it feeling like old times, it feels like real old times in the 80s where Dan Reeves just kind of took the shackles off the last few minutes of the game and the Broncos figured out a way to get a win with the offense, even if they'd look putrid the whole game back in the LA days. Here's what I've got to tell fans. Don't expect massive changes because at the end of the day, they did not bring in this coaching staff and go through everything that they went through to scrap this philosophy after 2 games. We know what happens when you throw the ball all over the yard. We've seen it the last 3 years. You get great fantasy numbers. We all get to draft our favorite Broncos and root with them until our playoff games and Super Bowls in mid to early December. But then guess what? We get to the playoffs and you have a struggle. Or you decide all of a sudden you want to run the ball or set a physical tone or not give the other team as many possessions as you're having, and it doesn't work. And 2 of the 3 years that we've seen this, they bowed out in the first round and done it for a reason. I would say this. You've got to keep going with what you're doing because, again, I'll talk about Mark Schlereth, Dave Diaz-Infante, Jeb Putz here, all guys that have played in the Kubiak scheme. If you're going to run the ball and you're going to be physical and you're going to be the team that has both a running game and a passing game, that mentality to run the ball comes now. You've got to establish that now. You can't decide at your bye week, oh, we need to run the ball more. It's got to be in your DNA, and it really has to be in your DNA in this offense. And there's no point to scrap it yet. They're 2-0. I would also say when it comes to the passing game, everyone's worried about Peyton's arm strength and so on and so forth. The best I can describe it that I'm seeing right now is another reason why it hasn't looked good. Again, Emmanuel Sanders misses all of training camp. Demaryius Thomas misses all of OTAs. We go back to the offensive line not being together until they had the first week of the regular season. Same thing with this group of receivers and Manning. You've got Demaryius Thomas. And on the one play, he's hooking out a little bit. Manning saw that hooking in. We're talking about little 1 yard differences in where the receivers and Manning are seeing the route end, and they're off. And when you're off in the NFL, the window's not very big. We're used to Peyton Manning putting the ball right there as soon as the receiver gets there before the defensive back has a chance to make a play. This is new for him. Emmanuel Sanders told us during the offseason, this offense tells you where to run your route. Last year's offense, you came to the line, everybody looked, you ran a couple motions so you could figure out if it was zone or man or whatever, and then everybody kind of figured out where the little open pocket would be and they'd run there. They just aren't seeing the same thing yet. Again, all of this is going to come along every week, but you're going to have to stick with it, and they are going to stick with it. That's what we all have to accept. Just because we're all panicking, they're not going to just scrap it after 2 games. That's not what John Elway does, and I would point to the Baltimore game. If you want a reason why it's worth sticking with, the 10-minute drive that got him the field goal, that got him the ultimate 6-point advantage, was basically created because they ran the football. Peyton wasn't having a great day, but they ran the football. Peyton made the passes that he needed to, and they won. And the other thing I take out of these first 2 games, I don't think enough people have talked about, we all remember the famous line, John Elway wants a team that's going out kicking and screaming. They've done that these last 2 games. I knew people on the sideline, Denver media, on the sideline at Kansas City game, that basically said they weren't tying this thing up. And instead, we're all walking out with our jaws dropped, wondering how they just pulled that off. I mean, if nothing else, they're making big steps towards the identity that John Elway said he wanted.
Don't you feel like you just went to football school right there? All courtesy of Bronco Planet and our buddy Andy. So thanks for sharing that with us. Let's talk about the defense, and then I want to ask you a little bit about this. You got the greatest gig on the planet, so we'll get to that in a second. So this defense, not only are the starters impressive, but the depth looks good, so you can give those guys a rest. You talked about how battled and bruised they were after the Baltimore game. Tell us what you think about this defense. Is this, I know we got the Orange Crush, and it's only 2 games, but is this the best defense the Broncos have ever had?
Well, that's a great question, Chad. I don't know that I can answer that right now. I can say this confidently. This is the best defense they've had easily since the 90s and probably the 80s. Now, Wade Phillips' first run as a defensive coordinator here was in 1989. I remember it well because that was Steve Atwater's rookie year, and who didn't love Steve Atwater? I got to be honest with you, my favorite player ever, even over John Elway, which I know is sacrilege, but John Elway's just like 1B, but I love Steve Atwater. I think it's the best defense at least since 89, which was a defense that despite Bobby Humphrey and a nice rookie year, the defense kind of paced them to that Super Bowl. Now, they were outclassed when they got against that phenomenal 49er team. We all remember the Super Bowl. We won't talk about that. But I do believe, you go back to John Elway's Super Bowl teams. It was a machine of an offense with Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp, Gary Zimmerman, Ed McCaffrey, Rod Smith. You just couldn't stop that. And then you had enough pressure coming where you could get to the quarterback and keep the points down enough where teams knew they couldn't keep up. Good defense. This defense, they come in waves. You've got 4 legitimate linebacking pass rushers in Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, Shaq Barrett, who's been, I don't know if anyone's noticed, Shaq Barrett is beating Shane Ray into the game. So, and then Shane Ray comes in. Those are 4 guys. Malik Jackson's been extremely good. You've gotten something out of Antonio Smith, which frankly was a little surprising to me. And you don't even have Derek Wolfe in the mix yet, and we haven't even talked about the secondary. You have the best cover tandem in the league with Aqib Talib and Chris Harris. And oh, by the way, your first corner in the game for extra coverage is Bradley Roby, who's probably starting for 25 of the 32 teams right now. It's incredible what John Elway has built. And while we're all so worried about, again, our fantasy teams and that offense, we need to sit back. We need to appreciate this defense. And people, you've been around a long time. We used to have to worry. We used to have to let the defense give us heart attacks, just like that first game in the 80s. I think this team may look a little bit more like that, but if they're winning, who cares how you get it done?
Well, you bring up fantasy a couple times, and then this is where I got to try and draw. I love my Broncos more than anything there is out there, but we are big fantasy things. And speaking of fantasy, I do want to tell you guys that if you ever seen That's Good Sports with Brandon Perna, him and I have been blessed enough to have a sponsor give us some free dough to go try and do this FanDuel. We're tired of hearing these commercials about these regular Joes that are becoming millionaires and winning thousands here and there. So you got to check that out in the coming weeks. We're going to show it here on Bronco Planet as well. So let's see how we do with it. This is house money. And then you know what we'll do? We'll give it away. We'll have some fun with if we win anything. If we don't, we're going to cancel the show immediately and apologize to the
That'll
sponsor.
be that.
So anyway, anyway, look forward to that. All right, now let's move on to this gig that you have. I mean, I've happened to go to a preseason game. I'm up in a box, and I look down there, and then up on the big screen, there's Andy, and I'm thinking, man, this guy's got to be loving life. He's in a full stadium. I know you've been a Bronco fan forever. Now you're on the sidelines. You're interviewing players. Tell me about your gig. What are the pros and cons of your gig?
There's not a lot of cons. At home, there are no cons. I guess if you love, like, I'm not a red zone channel guy. I'm more into the story of the game, how a drive got there. I want to know the critical plays. I mean, think about it. When the Broncos had that drive from the 2-yard line just against Baltimore, there were a couple plays on the other side of the 50 that mattered almost as much as anything that happened inside the red zone. So I guess if you like red zone channel or Sunday ticket or whatever, then that's the con. But for me, to be around the stadium, to be around the energy, to be on the field, it's incredible. It is incredible because this is the team. I grew up in the fan base. I'm lucky my media career kept me here. It's cool to be around John Elway. On the road, it's travel. It's quick trips. Like, we're spoiled travel-wise. You get on a bus, you get police escorts everywhere. You're never in an airport. You're taking charter planes. So it's the best way to travel. But nonetheless, like, we'll fly out. For example, we'll leave at around 10 o'clock this Saturday. We fly into Detroit. The team will go through a walkthrough. I'll have a little downtime. We go with some of the guys, get some dinner. Next day, because it's a night game, we'll wake up a little bit later, so maybe I'll get to watch one of the early games. But usually on the road, it's get up, get to the bus, get to the stadium, do a pregame show, go down, watch the game, which is awesome. Hopefully you have a winning locker room. It's not a lot of fun when you don't have a winning locker room. Then it's back on the bus, back to the airport, and we fly out immediately that night. There's no going back to a hotel, and so, like, we'll be back, middle of the night, Monday morning. So it's a bit of a rough turnaround. I suppose that's the only con. But again, I don't know, it is the greatest job in the world because you have season tickets for the sidelines, so there's nothing to complain about.
Now, when somebody, I'm sure they're telling you, hey, go get this interview, and maybe it's somebody that fumbled earlier in the game, or maybe the run isn't working well, and hey, go ask Kubiak, about this run thing. Will you do that? And how hard is that when players are looking at you like, dude, you make me sick. Don't talk to me right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, what you try to do is, so one of my guys is Chris Harris. The guys, and I keep losing them, Jacob Tammy, Zane Beatles, Pot Roast, Kevin Vickerson. I've had a number of guys, our guy Joe Mays over the years, Mario Hagan. I've always tried to have a group of guys that I knew when you had that heartbreaking loss at the end. And when they lost to the Colts last year, my guy was Chris Harris, who didn't let me down. He knows I'm going to give him 2 questions. You try to make him as mundane as possible. If I were on the national news and I was, wanting to get the Aaron Andrews headline with Richard Sherman screaming at me, maybe I'd try to pull at the emotional strings. But there's a respect level and kind of a relationship there. What's different for me is I'm in the locker room every day. So once we're done with that interview, I've got to see him the next day and the next day and the next day. So there's a little bit of decorum you try to use, unlike a national person that can come in, ask whatever hot topic they want to, get out of there and not even worry about dealing with them the next week. So you try to establish a relationship for the tough games. The worst that I ever had, because I just got the gig, was back in 2008. And it was Eddie Royal's rookie year, if you remember. They had that great start, and then they collapsed. And the collapse finished itself, even though the last game in San Diego technically was the end. We all, I'm sure, remember the freezing cold home game against Buffalo. And I can remember, again, first year on the gig, don't have enough established relationships. Like, a couple of the guys that I knew would talk to me headed to the locker room right away. And I'm standing in the middle of this frozen field as there were a couple guys left literally staring up at the sky trying to figure out how they just lost to the Bills and cost themselves a shot at the playoffs. And Eddie Royal was literally just staring off into the abyss. And I asked Eddie, I go, Eddie, I got to get somebody for 2 questions. Will you please just let me ask you a couple questions? And he was like, yeah, man, whatever. So Dave throws down to me, because the way it works is Dave's talking and he's either watching me or waits for me to tell my producer, I've got him, let's go. Then he throws down. I said, okay, let's go now. And Eddie goes, wait, what now? And as if he had not even heard what I had said to him. And Dave is throwing down because it was a quick toss. I start talking, and if you go back and listen to that interview, Eddie's going, man, not now. I don't want to do it now. And that's when I grabbed him by the jersey because he was a rookie. I would not have the gall if he wasn't a rookie to do that. And I just quickly asked a couple. They're always the worst interviews. I think Ronnie Hillman hooked me up after Baltimore, again with that lost glaze. The locker rooms are where it's even worse. At least when you're on the field, they haven't really had it sink in. When you get to the locker room, like last year, Aqib Talib after the Colts loss, he just kept telling everybody, questions. I want questions. That's not a question. Give me another question or we're done. That's when it gets a little bit rough and you just want to get a few answers and get out of there. Because really, what are you going to say? Yeah. You lost the game. So obviously nothing went right?
All right. Well, all right. Let's share a great moment, though. Is there any interview that on the opposite side, it's after a great win or something happened that just you were?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of magical moments. So I'll tell you a couple of my favorite, then I'll give you the top. I love talking to Champ Bailey after the AFC Championship. We were up on the big screen. I was doing stuff with Broncos TV. That was pretty incredible because Champ was going to the Super Bowl, and you could see it. Again, as I talk about the loss washing over guys, for Champ, it was the opposite because the wind was washing and the sinking in was going, and just was such a cool moment. He realized he was on the big screen, and then I got tackled by half of his teammates as they got to him. Talking to Wes Welker and hearing the crowd react and talking to Pot Roast. That AFC Championship win was a lot of fun. I can remember standing with the guy, another one of my go-to guys who didn't last very long was Daniel Fells, the tight end. When Tebow pulled off the incredible in Miami, I remember talking to Daniel Fells, and we were waiting again for the throwdown from Dave. We're standing on the Dolphins logo, and I look at Daniel, and I was like, what just happened? And he's like, dude, I don't know. Did we really just win that game? And we're almost so lost in this conversation of trying to process what you saw that I almost didn't hear the throw from Dave. But the absolute best moment, and it was funny because it just showed how you can be out of shape and still thin. Demaryius Thomas catches the slant route from Tebow in the overtime against Pittsburgh, and I see my pregame interview my postgame interview dashing 80 yards the other way, and I have to wait until he's at least cleared it. And luckily, I've got some friends on the Broncos staff that let me go running down the sideline to try to catch him. And so once he got inside the 20, I was on the field literally running after him. And I think his teammates, they were all very patient to wait till he crossed the goal line before they went too. But normally I'm not supposed to cut through the Broncos sideline. And then when I got to him, he was walking around, and I had to literally dig him out of a pile of teammates. And he gives me like a half hug. I don't even think he knows what's going on. And I start to talk to him, and I almost got a concussion because guys were still slapping him. They're catching my head. I took like 3 headshots that day. But it was the best. Like, Demaryius is a very shy guy. I think, I don't know how he comes off in interviews to the general public, but he's extremely shy and doesn't like the attention. He does his best, but he doesn't like it. Demaryius was so raw in his emotion and how incredible he thought it was, and gave me the best answers about how everything went down. That'll always be my favorite moment.
So
hopefully we get a Super Bowl to make it better.
Yeah, no, we got to top that this year. I think you got the defense to make it happen this year. So, no, I mean, I think it's exciting. But once again, the greatest gig ever. You think about all those moments you're talking about. The average fan is, throwing a beer down and, throwing things around the house, hugging the wife, doing all that stuff. And you're in the pile, getting hit in the head.
Yeah.
So that's a great gig to have. So, and it's been fun to, anybody that's been in Colorado has turned on the radio, 850, and heard you talking. It doesn't matter if it's about local bands, it's about, the latest Broncos stuff, and just, and let's be honest, there's been a fair amount of change over the years. And you're like I travel a lot for work, and I love to come into Denver, and I turn on that radio and I hear Andy and I think I'm home. And I think Bronco fans feel that about everything. So I appreciate you. I know you're the busiest guy in town. Come out here to join us at the cave. So appreciate it, and looking forward to seeing you get batted down a few more times.
Yeah.
If you're running down the sidelines, good things are happening.
That's right. Hopefully my 40 time improves.
All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of Bronco Planet. We'll catch you next week, where we have a former Bronco, Ebenezer Ekibon, is going to be here on the set, and looking forward to another Broncos win. Go Broncos!